this isn't your grandpappy's military anymore. There's actually a higher rate of suicide for the people that have never deployed and are in their first terms in the Marine Corps. And that's a wild statistic. And I had to look it up a couple times.
Welcome to How I Embraced the Suck, a podcast where you get to hear from veterans what life in the military is really like. I am your host, Walt, and before we start, you should know that I do not censor the show in any way. You have been warned. All right, today with us we've got Luke, a former Marine who can't throw axes well, but at least he didn't lose the war. How's it going?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. That was great. I love that.
Awesome. Yeah, so tell the listener kind of what's your background?
So I joined the Marine Corps in 2012, right out of high school. I was a, 06, 11, something like that. MOS. No, I don't even think that's right. 0621. Jesus Christ, forgot my MOS. I was a radio operator. Everybody's going to be screaming stolen valor now. Watch.
Right.
I was a radio operator. I went to Japan for my first duty station. I was there for about 2 years and 4 months. And then I was in 29 Palms, California with an Arty battalion down there, 311. And while I was in Japan, I was with an engineer support battalion, 9th ESB. Got to do a lot of cool stuff there because I worked with the EOD guys, the explosive ordnance disposal guys, a lot, which was awesome. I had a little bit different of a military career than most. I didn't deploy or anything like that. It was a weird time, 2012. It was kind of a weird time to join because it was like in the middle of like drawdowns, but at the same time we were sending a whole bunch of troops. But in the Marine Corps, we kind of made it to one regiment, which was 7th Regiment. And I ended up going to 7th Regiment afterwards and was slated for a deployment, but I EAS'd instead of continuing on. I was like, I'm getting out of the Marine Corps. I'm done with this. But yeah, I guess that's kind of like a good background real quick. I got out as a sergeant, E5, 4 years, which is pretty good, even in my MOS. But yeah.
Just because you stayed out of trouble. That's like the minimum requirement?
Yeah, kind of. So I probably wasn't the best Marine, to be honest. Like I was damn good at my job. I could do all the physical fitness requirements. I was probably one of the top in that for the people that came in at the same time as I did. I always played sports growing up, and it was boot camp. Physically, it was really easy. Mentally, for myself, it was pretty easy. I always had a problem. My parents were surprised I joined the military in general because I always had a little bit of a problem with authority and like asking questions, basically asking why for things. And so in the Marine Corps,
so I'm going to join the Marines.
Yeah, yeah. It was more of I think the Marine Corps was more of like my way out of trying to. It's kind of like like a glory story. Like you were looking for your glory story.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I joined. I didn't really want to go to school. I was really good at school. I could have joined any job I wanted to in the Marine Corps, and I scored high enough on my ASVAB. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I just first ticket out, like get me on it, like first ticket out. I even changed my contract twice. Didn't care what the job was. Originally, I was supposed to be, it wasn't forward observer. I was supposed to be logistics at first. When I signed my first contract at 18, literally 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. And then my second contract that was sooner was, I think it was like Intel or something like that. I didn't have it for very long because then another contract came up and it sped me up like 2 months, which was July of 2012. And
okay.
That was radio operator. So I was like, yep, let me take it. I'll go.
Gotcha. Yeah. Huh. So yeah, what was your motivation for joining up?
So there was a whole bunch of things. I was playing basketball. I was a senior. I was captain. And before that, I didn't really have a whole lot of opportunities getting looked at going to colleges for sports. And that's the only reason why I did as good in school as I did, is because I wanted to keep playing sports.
Right.
And so I was really good at school, and I'd always had a pretty easy time in school. And I got a couple academic scholarships, but I didn't really want to fucking pay. I kind of realized at a young age that it was a waste of money to do school that way unless you get somebody to pay for it. So, and I didn't want to stay in Arizona, and that's the only scholarships that I was getting. And then I was playing basketball, and I got some looks my senior year, but I didn't understand how the NCAA works.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't make it in the cut to even receive scholarships for sports. So I was like, well, I don't really. And when I found that out, literally the day that I found that out, a Marine Corps recruiter called me, and I had already been thinking about it, just in general, like kind of like maybe I'll just go join the military, then I can go do whatever I want. I don't have to. I can feel more independent of myself, which is the exact wrong thing to think, because you're not independent in the military. But you don't know that as a kid. That's what they think. That's what they tell you. And he had been calling me for a couple weeks. So I was like, well, if you can show up to my school in the next 2 hours, you can give me your spiel, kind of thing. And I wouldn't have joined any of the other branches. I already knew that was off the table. I was like, nope, if I'm going to join the military, I'll join the Marine Corps, just because it's the few, the proud, the Marines, you know?
Right.
And I felt like it was special. So I was like, I felt like I was special at that time. So I was like, all right, cool. Like, I'm going to do the hardest thing, because that's what I usually go the hardest route through things. And he showed up, and before he like launched into his spiel, and before he even had a chance to stop or like take a breath, I was like, yeah, dude, don't worry about it. I'll be down in your office next week, and I can sign up. I'm 18. So get the paperwork started. And he was just like, what? Like, I'm so confused. And I actually ended up seeing him in Japan after I got stationed there, which is kind of weird. Some people see their recruiters a lot. I was barely at the recruiting station. I only showed up when they made me show up. And then after that, it was really crazy seeing him in Japan. And I mean, he was this tiny guy, motor T guy. And I saw him, and I'm a 6'2", pretty stocky guy. And he was just like, holy shit, you actually made it through. Like, he thought I was like he was just surprised that I wasn't like knocked down or getting in trouble, because I just never showed up for shit, because I was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to do your workouts. I don't need to do any of this stuff. I'm more in shape than everybody else here.
Right.
Like, I'll be fine. And then I just showed up for the day to leave to boot camp and joined. And like I said, it was kind of like my own little glory story. I thought I could do something. I thought it was something that was like righteous to do. I wasn't really a like right-leaning person growing up. I was very lefty. My parents are lesbians, so I grew up with two moms in my household, and they leaned on the Democrat side, and but I just knew that it was like respected, regardless of who you met at that time. Regardless of who you met, you kind of had like an air of respect,
right?
That followed you, and I really liked that. And then being a Marine on top of that, there was a respect towards from other branches as well, it seemed like. And that was kind of, I've always thought respect and loyalty and like brotherhood were very important in my life. And, or like just like family scenarios.
Right.
I'm always very close knit with my friends and things like that. And that kind of had the most appeal with something like the military, where it seemed like all the military people I met, they talk about their buddies getting back together after 15 years. And I was like, I want that bond. And so that was one of the other reasons why I joined as well.
Huh. Yeah. Like the familial camaraderie, I guess, or esprit de corps, all that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you didn't see your recruiter a lot, I was going to ask, did your like expectations, were those fulfilled? You know, when you're going in, of what your recruiter told you?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. No. Well, my recruiter, like I said, it was a weird relationship, probably than most people. Like Typo, my buddy, he talks about his, like, he knew his recruiter. His recruiter was like one of his good friends, and some of my, or like a family friend, and some of the other people I went through the Marine Corps with, it was kind of the same for them. But for me, it was a transaction. It was like, hey, I'm ready to go. Sign me up. Tell me when and where, and I'll be there. Where do I sign? Kind of deal. And yeah, so it was a little bit like I said, I had a weird Marine Corps career. I probably did better than most people that act the way I do in the Marine Corps, just because of how I'm very good at being tactful when I speak, when I need to be. And a lot of people that probably have my same temperament and attitude aren't. So I got lucky. But yeah, it was very transactional, me going into the military with my recruiter.
Yeah. Huh. What was Okinawa like?
Oh, while you're there, everybody hates it. While you're there, everybody fucking hates it. But when I came back to the States, we all missed it. We were like, holy shit, I wish I was back in Oki. Okinawa is weird, especially for the Marine Corps, because, well, Japan in general is weird for the Marine Corps. We're on like a pretty strict lockdown over there, and this is before COVID and all that fun stuff. Yeah. It's we're like on a pretty strict lockdown, so you're not allowed to have a car. You can't live off base. That's kind of true for most military bases if you're not married or a certain rank. But you're not allowed to live off base in Japan. You're not allowed to have a car, which that one's not. That one in the United States, it's fine. And in most other countries, it's fine. But in Japan, you're not allowed to unless you're married or have some extenuating circumstances where they allow it, which is very difficult to have. The barracks are trash, at least where I was on Camp Hansen. There was always a problem with mold or asbestos in our barracks. I kind of got lucky because the guy that I was roomed with, he was the guy that's like me, but not tactful and kind of overweight, and wasn't like, he was a damn good at his job, but was a horrible, absolutely horrendous Marine. And so we kind of made our room our own, which was cool because not a lot of other people did that. And we jerry rigged everything so it looked and felt nice as much as possible. The culture in Japan is really cool. It's very interesting. Okinawa doesn't think that they're Japanese. They're Okinawan. They're very prideful in their country, which they see it as their own country, that Japan is like kind of annexed, basically, for a better word. It'd be like a Puerto Rico situation,
Sure.
Like for the United States is the most similar I can make it. And it's on the very like southern portion of the islands. So Japan, everybody sees like the big Japan, but there's like 150 islands that go all the way down. That's pretty far south of Japan, and Okinawa is part of that bottom southern tip of the Japanese islands. So it's kind of more tropically, but not like white sand, clear, because it's Pacific Ocean, so it's not clear water. It's like very murky, dark blue water. But it's a cool little island. It's nothing crazy. A whole bunch of rice fields. The culture. It was definitely a culture shock getting there first.
Yeah.
It was my first duty station. So it was different than everywhere else in the Marine Corps that I had been so far. And then second, it being, Japan, I was like, yo, what the fuck? Like, where am I? And that was pretty cool. I appreciate it a lot more now. And when I first got back to the States, I appreciated it a lot more. And I probably appreciate it a lot more now than I did then. And you can do some things in Japan that you can't do in the States, whether it's training side, like in the actual Marine Corps, or whether it's, if you want to go party and things like that. And you get away with a lot more shit in Japan because it's like a touchy situation between the United States government and the Okinawan government and Japanese government. So you kind of, the drinking laws are different there. There's a lot of laws that are different there when it comes to like partying and things like that. And all the clubs are open until like 5 a.m. And if you can get away from base and like, sneak your way through, you can be out until 5 a.m. and get away with stuff. And that was kind of the cool part. And then you're so secluded from the rest of the Marine Corps that things don't happen the same way. It's like a much slower paced Marine Corps, especially on Camp Hansen. So you hear in like movies, and then you hear from a lot of like other vets that it's like if you're a Lance Corporal in E3 or below, or an NCO in E5 and below, E5, E4, everything's yes sir, or obviously with captains everything's yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am.
Right.
But then
Right.
in the Marine Corps we do yes staff sergeant, no staff sergeant, yes sergeant, no sergeant, yes corporal, no corporal. But in our little unit, it just didn't work that way. Like E5 and below, it was kind of like a war against E5 and below versus E6 and officer, E6 and above and officers. We just kind of like, we ran everything, and it didn't seem like our officers and our staff NCOs really knew how to do shit. There was a couple onesies and twosies, but, and that's the other thing that I guess we don't really talk about it that much, but the weird thing about 2012 and like the 2010 to the 2000, like 14, 15 generation, a lot of those staff NCOs, they were, you know, privates, lance corporals and private first classes in the original invasion and things like that.
Right.
So a lot of them, you didn't have to be good. You just had to be there. You know what I mean? So
you had to be available.
Exactly. And, you know, don't get me wrong. These guys had plenty of problems, whether it was from actual military things or just they should have never been into the military in the first place. They would have gotten, you know, where when I was joining, it was pretty selective on who they were bringing in because they were trying to draw down. And in the initial invasions in 2001 and 2002, and then in Iraq in 2003, they weren't as selective. So a lot of these, and so that's just kind of how, like, it's a weird time frame, those senior leadership guys. And it wasn't very yes sir, no sir. It was, I'm going to do this and we're going to argue about it. And me as a Lance Corporal was able to argue against a staff NCO because he had no idea what he was talking about. And it was a really weird time. And that's another reason why I say I had a weird time in the Marine Corps.
Huh. So they were available then when they joined up, and then just by existing and not getting in trouble, they managed to get promoted. And then here you come in driven and motivated, and you're like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
This is the way we need to do it.
Exactly. That's kind of like, that was the big thing where we always joked about, man, you can make it to any rank you want as long as you just stay in. Like, all you have to do is stay in and don't get a tattoo that's showing. Like, that's like it.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the big problem, especially with those guys. That was their mentality too. They're like, well, you know, I'm 8-9 years in, 10 years down the road, I'm an E5, E6, or not E5, but E6, E7. And they're like, all I have to do is wait out another 8 years and then I can retire. And, you know, there's not a lot of drive anymore. Like I figured out that I can just stay. And as long as I stay and don't get in trouble and, you know, keep a decently fit body, then I'll get through and, you know, I'll be fine and have my retirement at 38, which I don't blame the people, but at the same time, when you're an egotistical 18-year-old that has some, you know, something to prove, you're like, yo, we could be doing this so much better. And you guys are stopping me from doing it because they don't like to rock the boat. And it's like, you got to rock the boat so things can change. And, you know, it's the round and round. And it's like, well, we don't need to rock the boat because it's doing just fine. And it's like, is it doing just fine? And so that was kind of like it drove me psychotic. It drove me insane.
You mentioned in Oki, it was there when you're there, you hate it. When you leave it, you remember it fondly. Do you think the isolation contributed to that? Or was it kind of you were mentioning how it wasn't all yes or no, sir. It was more relaxed. Do you think that caused it? Or just that everybody experienced this terrible thing together and you're like, oh, well, it was terrible, but man, what memories, you know?
So I think you're onto something with that last one. The first two are kind of like part of it where you're so isolated, like you're always with everybody. Like my two roommates, when I had my roommates down here before I moved in with my girlfriend, I mean, we had been together since Okinawa. Like we all, I got out a year before them, and Typo and my buddy Nick, they came and we all moved in together here. We were so you were always together in Okinawa. So that was a part of it. That brotherhood, that camaraderie that we talked about at the beginning, that was there in Okinawa because you couldn't go anywhere. You know, you were in the barracks all the time, and you had to be back by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock every night. And so you couldn't go anywhere, and you were always together. So you always did shit together. And that was really cool. It sucks because you get annoyed with each other because there's a whole bunch of, early 20s dudes, constant, no women. And so you're constantly just like at each other's throats, but having the best of times.
Right.
And then the laxness of our unit was awesome. And it was really hard going to other units for all of us because we were like, no, we don't do that. Like, what are you talking about? And so we were kind of problem children when we left our unit, and we all had different units in 29 Palms. But then I think that third part is probably the most true, is that like misery loves company. It's one of like a big saying for us. And it's like, we went through some of the worst times together there and you don't even remember, like a lot of times you don't even remember the worst times, but it, you just have that when you think back on it, you have like that drop in your stomach where you're like, oh, I'm going to get yelled at for something, because you just remember all the bad times. But then right afterwards, you're like, but man, I had some crazy times there where we all like got together and did stupid crap that we should have never done, but we did anyways. And so that's kind of like, it's so miserable that it's kind of like the theme of the military, especially for E5 and below, is like you're in such a miserable state all the time that really small things become really fun things, and they stick out a lot more. And that's kind of that's probably where that camaraderie comes from, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's kind of what I was imagining. Yeah. What about 29? So you went straight from Oki to 29 Palms, same job, just a different unit.
Yep, same job. There's not a whole lot of chance to move jobs. There's a couple availabilities, but you'd have to go back through school, and it usually comes with a new contract. And I was leaving Oki, I didn't know if I was going to re-enlist yet or not. I was kind of like up in the air. Funny thing about Oki, trying to leave there, they're supposed to send all your stuff over. They pay for it, obviously, because they're the ones that are moving you. They did not do that for me. My unit was trash, and I ended up spending like $2-3 grand trying to send all my stuff from Okinawa to 29 Palms, California.
Wow.
Through UPS. It was horrible. And then on top of that, they cut me orders. So cutting orders, they said, hey, your time's up here. Here's your new orders. This is your next duty station. You have until this date to report to them, kind of thing. And it's usually like a month long. Well, they pay for you to go back and everything. And they're supposed to pay for, obviously, your stuff to get flown there. Well, that didn't happen. They also didn't have enough money to send me back to the United States. So I got cut orders in, I think it was like January or February. And I didn't leave until May, I think, because they didn't have money to send me back. And if that unit wanted to, they could have said I was AWOL because I didn't show up in time for the orders to be executed.
Oh,
and so like it was like I was like flipping shit for a while there because I was like, yo, I can't even leave. Like I was there 2 months past the date that I was supposed to, or 2 or 3 months past the date that I was supposed to be there. And that usually doesn't happen either. So like I said, it was just like a weird time for me. But yeah, and then I went to 311 RD battalion. It's an artillery battalion, which we don't use in Iraq or Afghanistan anymore. Well, Afghanistan especially now. But I went there, and I was part of just the general comm shop there. And one of the other guys that I was with in Okinawa, who I hated, I didn't like this guy. He had been stuck with me since comm school, and he just sucked. He was a horrible Marine, horrible person. It just wasn't my cup of tea. He ended up going to the same unit, but he got there before I did. And he got moved over to what's called the FSCC, which is where Jared was. It's the fire control center. Basically, they do all the observing. It's where all the forward observers, JTACs and JFOs are. They control aircraft, and then they're usually the ones that you see in movies where they're up all by themselves on a hill and they're telling people where to shoot the artillery from. And so he was over there, and they get slated for deployments. They get attached to 7th Regiment at the time to go to Iraq, I believe, at that point. And he's not a good Marine. Like, he's not even a good Marine by like physical standpoint. He's a weird kid, and they hated him over there because they're kind of like bro-y comparatively to the rest of the Marine Corps, kind of that more laid back stance. They aren't near as laid back as we were in Oki, but they were more laid back than the rest of the unit. And so he just sucked. So they wanted him out of there, and I was like, I'll go. Like, I wanted to go on a deployment. That was like the main thing that I felt like I was missing from my Marine Corps career. Was I was like, I have all these accolades of, you know, turning around millions of dollars that for the Marine Corps. Like, I controlled a lot of our cryptographic gear and stuff like that in Oki, and worked with EOD. Like, I did a lot of really good things for the Marine Corps and made people look really good, that I was like, well, now I want to look really good and I want to go on a deployment kind of deal. And I thought I was going to be able to extend for like a year or two to go on the deployment, but so I ended up transferring over to the FSCC, and that's where I met some of my other good friends, Jared being one of them, who I ran the podcast with. And then some other buddies that we actually ended up living with too here in Phoenix after we all got out. But they wouldn't let me extend for the deployment. They wanted me to re-enlist. So I was like sitting on it till the last minute. And I ended up, while I was there inside the FSCC, I ended up realizing, like, well, first I started to come into the realizations that I've come to recently about, you know, war, politics, and things like that. And then second, the big thing that basically scared me out was I can't trust the people in charge of me. And that was the big thing. I was like, I'm going to be the guy that they're going to tell me to do something stupid. I'm going to tell them no, and they're going to make me do it. Or somebody else is going to do it because I said no, because I know it's stupid. And somebody else is going to blindly follow. And then they're going to get hurt, or something's going to happen to them. And I'm going to have to be the one that goes and tries to correct it and get shot and, you know, die over in Iraq, even though I don't even want to be here anymore. And this whole fucking thing was stupid because we could have mitigated this risk, but these people shouldn't be in charge of anything. And I was like, I can't do that. And I don't want to be a part of that anymore. And so that was I was just like, nope. And then they were really pissed at me after that because they transferred me over there. But they ended up liking me a little bit more because none of their radio operators did what I did in Okinawa. Like, I did some specialized things in Okinawa that they couldn't teach because they didn't have any radio operators that would be able to teach it, even in like the main comm shop. So like I ended up helping them figure out HF, like it's a high frequency radio stuff, and then some of the UHF stuff, and then we had like a tactical chat, which is like a tactical email that they wanted to do that they didn't know how to do, but they kept like forcing people to try and figure it out, but none of them knew how to do it, and I did. So they ended up like needing me in the position, but it wasn't to do what they wanted me to do, but it ended up helping them in the long run anyways, because none of their guys would have been able to do it regardless. So it, like I said, I just been in like a really give and take position. I put myself in very good positions of leverage in the Marine Corps that kind of saved my ass on multiple occasions.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with radios, like would the radios be brought to you? Were you assigned to a unit? Or if you say you're in the main shop, would you go out to units as they needed help with stuff? Or
so the FSCC, like I said, is kind of its own thing. It's not how the majority of the military operates. Okinawa is probably a better one. So you have one battalion, right? And there's four companies in the battalion. You have H&S, let's just say 1st Battalion and 2nd Battalion, and then Bulk Fuel Battalion. That's kind of how it was set up in Okinawa. So Bulk Fuel doesn't have any radio operators. 1st and 2nd Battalion don't have any radio operators, and all of S6, which is the comm guys, they fall under the H&S company. So your main head shed, where your like COC is, your command and control center, it's usually all put together by your radio guys, or at least your comm guys in general. Data, maintenance, radio maintenance, data, and then radio operators. So we all sit inside S6, and then when we do forward our operations, or any kind of operations really, we'll assign radio operators from our shop to different battalions, and they're in control of their radio set that I would give them. Yeah.
Okay. So are there vehicle mounted radios, or is that a different ballpark, or what?
Yeah. So we have just basically amps that go into vehicles. So it kind of uses like it's its own little. There's a whole bunch of different vehicle mounts that you can use. But yeah, so we have they're basically just amps. They're not actual radios that go in there. There's radios that plug into these amps, and we can use those radios standalone. And then the amps themselves are retrofitted so that you're able to plug the radio into the amp
and just boost the signal or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. And we use that for a lot of like retrans stuff, where if we can't, like if there's a big mountain range or something in the way, you put somebody up on top of the mountain, because most of our radios are line of sight. They have to be able to see the other antenna. So you do stuff like that. And that's usually where we use with the amperage from the vehicles. That helps boost your signal as well. So,
okay. Yeah. Some of the questions I had, now would probably be good. Usually I wait till the end, but now would probably be a good time to intro, your hat there.
Oh yeah.
Cause some of the questions I have are related to what I've heard you guys say or whatever. So, so you mentioned Typo and Jared, tell us about the podcast a little bit.
Yeah. So, about 2 years ago now, Typo and Jared and I, we think we're funny. And, when we get drunk, we think we're funnier. So we kept saying like, oh, we should just start a podcast. We should start a podcast. And we basically bitched about the military, bitched about the government, and bitched about each other. Like that's kind of like our three things, our pinnacles of podcasting. And so we decided to start a podcast because we kind of came into the libertarian sphere at that point, and we really didn't hear a lot of veteran voices becoming anti-war. We didn't really know anything about like Adam Kokesh or some of the Stapleton, some of the other guys that were vets, and they also didn't really appeal to us. Like there's this thing called Vet TV, and they're like crude humor for the post 9/11 veteran. And it's like this, and one of their videos, it's like, this isn't your grandpappy's military anymore, because, and one of their intro videos, it's like, our fathers and grandfathers, like in our generation, they fought, like some of them fought in World War II, Vietnam, stuff like that. Great grandfathers basically in World War II, and that's where this scene takes place in their intro. And it's like them, like, oh, I can't wait to get home. We're fighting the good fight kind of deal. And, they're listening to fucking Edith Piaf and in a French chapel, like just wishing they were back home and they were like good American soldiers, and then it fast forwards and it's like, this isn't your grandpappy's, military anymore. And it's post 9/11 vets. And we're like the epitome of what the United States military never wanted their troops to be. Like we're insanely crass, where the dark humor is just joked about constantly. Suicide is a huge talking point, and it's not because everybody's dying. We just make fun of it so much. And it just, so like the older figures, and it's some of like the earlier generation, probably the guys that were in the Marine Corps before 9/11 happened and just continued on afterwards. Some of those guys, that's like the Adam Kokeshes and stuff, they just didn't hit the same way that we wanted to hit. Like it wasn't, you're not going to get the newer generation of vets to
Yeah.
latch onto this idea of being anti-war because we're so pumped up on like, let's go to war. Like that's our
Right.
job. Let's
Right.
go F shit up and, you know, go do some crazy crap just because like people were like, you get trained in boot camp at this point in time to fake jump on grenades if you see it. Like like there's like, you know, the total idea of like preserving your life has gone out the door. Like you get drilled it into you that your life is meaningless. Your life is there to save other people's lives, which first it's like, it sounds horrible and it is horrible. You probably shouldn't teach 18-year-olds that,
Yeah.
but fucking hell, it's an amazing way to live. Like, you know, you're always just pumping and ready to go. So that's kind of why we decided to do the podcast, is we thought we could put like the post 9/11 vet into libertarianism and that anti-war stuff, and some of like, well, now it's more into like the anti-government stuff with some of the things going on, and being like, yo, there's a place for you guys here. These aren't just like, you know, pocket protector nerds that speak theory at you and you're like, bro, I eat crayons. Like,
right.
I'm not gonna read Rothbard, I'm not gonna read Mises. Like, they're like, I want to be left alone and be able to smoke weed for my PTSD. Like they're like, I don't care about all that other stuff. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of why we did the podcast. And it was Jared, Typo, and I originally. Jared, he moved to Kentucky and he didn't really want to do it anymore. I think he had a lot more problems than I did. He, you know, he actually went over and deployed, and they had a little bit of a rough deployment for that time frame. And they lost someone close and personal to them. So I think talking about it constantly, and then he's a Twitter fiend. He's a Twitter fiend. So he would just get so annoyed on Twitter at people, and then he'd get deleted because he'd say something stupid that you're not allowed to say on Twitter, that he was like, all right, I'm just going to walk away. You guys want me on, I'll come on, but I'm not going to do it every week. And it's kind of a commitment. So that's kind of why we started it. And it's, I mean, Typo and I, we love it, man. It's kind of like a place for us to talk about shit that bothers us. And I think it's a good place for other vets to feel like they're in the smoke pit again, which is like where everybody congregated. And it's where you heard about who's getting a divorce now. Like, you know, that's where you find the guy that's, you know, crying by himself, and everybody's like, bro, do you need a cigarette? Like, what's going on? And it's like the bonding area. And that's kind of what we wanted to bring into, you know, the libertarian spheres, because there's a lot of guys that probably feel just like we do, and we found them. And you know, it's helped, and it's also helped a lot of guys that like, we've done some suicide episodes, and those have been really helpful, because you can't joke about suicide with your friends when you're, you know, a PTSD vet, because they're like, oh, do you need help? And it's like, nah, man, it's actually helping that I'm joking about it. Like, and people take it the wrong way. So, you know, some of those things are why we wanted to do it, bring a little bit more community back to the veteran sphere, because it's not all just libertarianism or whatever. It's a lot of just military BSing.
Yeah. Well, and you wanted to provide an alternative podcast for people who are put off by a podcast where it sounded like the host could read.
Yeah, exactly.
We want to flat.
No, right. It was good. It took me a second because I can barely hear. So
because it took me it took me like 12 minutes to get it out.
My tinnitus was kicking in too. I was like,
yeah. And so one thing, you kind of mentioned it, and I hadn't heard it anywhere else from anybody I've talked to, is how helpful it was for you vets to live together when you got out.
Oh,
and
yes.
just the continuing that bonding, or that group. Talk about that if you would.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, that was a big help. And I think, we have mentioned it in a couple episodes where it was like, I mean, even times when we all lived together, there was like us getting depressed and, you know, getting into our own heads about shit, and did we make the right choices, and, you know, this, that, or the other. But living together, it was like, yeah, dude, we're going through that too. And that was a big deal. And it was probably the smartest thing that we did. I'm really glad that we're all separate now and like going, I mean, 28 years old.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
been
yeah.
with my girlfriend for a while, and it was like, all right, we all kind of got to go our own way. But it was that's probably the biggest thing that saved us in a lot of aspects, if not saved our lives in a lot of aspects, was because we did move in together. And I mean, like one of our buddies that lived with two of the guys that we ended up moving in with. So there was there was us three and then another three, and we all knew each other. We're all good friends. And one of our buddies, one of the three that lived over there, he was like, all right, I'm going to deuce out. And he still had a lot of problems. And I mean, he ended up trying to take his life, and thank God he survived. But I think we all, like, right when they told us that he was moving, we're like, fuck, like he probably shouldn't move yet. Like there's a reason why we're doing so well. And, you know, we need a little bit more time to grow up. It seemed like, you know, you kind of, in life experience, you're so far ahead of your time when you get out of the military, but in mental experience, you're almost like back being a kid,
almost backwards a little bit.
Yeah, like you degrade because you get rid of emotion. Like, yeah, there's obviously emotion and people but I mean, I feel like when I look back at my time in the Marine Corps, I feel like most of it I was numb. Like, that's the best way I could explain it. Like, yeah, there was times where I was happy, and there was times where I was scared, or there was times that I was sad, or any of those things. But for the most part, if I could like generalize the entire thing as an emotion, it would have been numb. Like, I just didn't feel anything. And I tried really hard not to feel things because there was no point in feeling them in the situations that I was in.
Yeah, maybe kind of as an insulation from the lows. I mean, there's highs too, obviously, but as an insulation from the extreme lows of military life, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know, if you're from the time that you graduate boot camp to the time that you get out of the military, you're in the mode of like, I could, at a drop of a hat, be getting thrown into combat, and I could lose my life, and I can't sit there and you don't think about it anymore, because it's just like, yeah, let's fucking go do it. Like, you want to be in that headspace more than you want to be in the, oh, I could be killed headspace, obviously. So like, and like I said, I never did anything. Like, I went to Okinawa, worked with EOD, and we got to explode stuff, not in combat zones in Iraq, Afghanistan, anything like that. Got to work with them. And then I went to 29 Palms, didn't go on the deployment that I was supposed to. And, but there's something there that even the way that you're taught in everyday things, from the time that boot camp starts to the time, like I said, when you get out, you're in that mode no matter what. It's part of like the Marine Corps creed. Is like every Marine's a rifleman. And, you know, in cases of Iraq and Afghanistan at the beginning, you were sending S1 guys or your admin guys over into combat. So it's like, you're already in that. And with radio operators, a lot of times we get called battery operated grunts, as like jokes and to like make fun of them not actually being grunts.
But you're carrying the batteries.
You're carrying the batteries and the radios, and you got a big whip antenna above you. And, you know, if you looked at the life expectancy of a radio operator during an actual engagement in combat during the invasions, I mean, the Taliban and ISIS and all them, they're not stupid. They know who to take out first. It's, you know, communications and medics. So that's what they would do. And so it's like, all right, I'm ready to do that. So you put yourself every day into a position to be able to do that when it gets called upon you. And then when you never do, there's a big sense of like, oh shit, I never did anything.
Right.
And I mean, now for me, it's more of like, I'm really glad that I never had to do anything. That's kind of my point on it now, and how I've made my peace with that. Sure. But it's like survivor's guilt without ever actually having to be in any sort of conflict that really required you to feel guilty of surviving something that you never experienced.
Almost like survivor's guilt for, say, somebody that didn't get on the Titanic but was going to. Yeah, they didn't actually go through it, but they still feel just as bad. Potentially.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. And to the point, you know, the listener may not know, you you were talking about the six of you guys, your struggles and everything. You're not all combat vets.
No.
I mean, I know Jared was, and I don't know if any of the other guys were.
Yeah,
but
the other three were. Us three weren't. So that was kind of a weird thing too.
So it's not like you have to be in the trenches, killing people to have the same results. It's
right.
It's statistically, from what I've looked into a little bit, it's I think they were saying there's a slight increase after your second deployment.
Yeah, there is a slight increase, but in your first deployment, it's actually surprising. There's more people that, or before any deployments, there's more people that have never deployed per capita that kill themselves than the people now that kill themselves than the ones that never deployed. Like the Garrison Marine Corps, life sucks so bad in Garrison Marine Corps. And and it's because, I honestly believe it's because of this sense of like this lack of fulfillment in your career and in your life, that a lot of people, they get really down on themselves and they just hit that corner, and they drop really fast. That there's actually a higher rate of suicide for the people that have never deployed and are in their first terms in the Marine Corps. And that's a wild statistic, and I had to look it up a couple times. And it's really bad. Like the military life, and the Marine Corps has the highest rate of suicide, regardless of compared to the other branches.
Huh. Okay.
And yeah, so the Marine Corps has the highest rate of suicide compared to the other branches, and
first in all the stats.
Yeah, always first in, last out. But yeah, so like that's kind of one of our big focuses, is like we try to, that's why us moving out together was such a big deal. Originally, was because we all had our own crap to deal with, and at least we could all deal with each other's crap. And it was, fuck man, going to school and all that crap, and going back to your family. I hadn't seen my family in almost 4 years, basically. And because I was in Japan, it's hard as crap to go home. And I did go home a little bit when I came back to 29 Palms, because it's not too far from Phoenix. But after that, it was just like, it's hard. It was hard dealing with them because they don't understand what you're going through. And they're like, well, you didn't, like, they wouldn't ever say this to me, but it's like, I could see that it was hard for them to grasp why I was so the way I was, without having to go through some of the things that, like the horror parts of the military. And it's like, because a lot of the horror part of the military is just being in the military. And it's true.
I think you guys, I've heard you call it like living in the DOL, 24 hours a day.
Yep. It's, it's being a postman and having to live the postman's life always without ever going home. It's like you stay in the post office, or it's living in the DMV, like fucking waiting for your number to be called constantly, and everybody's an asshole to you there. And if you make one little mistake, then you're burned and you have to go back to the back of the line, and you're like, oh my God, I'm smarter than you people. I've already done everything that you need me to do.
Twice.
And twice. And you guys can't figure it out. And so that's like the worst part of the military. And I mean, the hurry up and wait, like, God, that was the worst. I hated that saying. And I hated when people said it, because I was like, why am I hurrying up then? Like, we should be doing this in a timely manner, or we shouldn't be doing this at all. And it's just a shitty place. It's not conducive for intelligence. It's not conducive for like true hard work. Like there's not a lot of true hard work that's accomplishing in the military. There's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of hard work for nothing. Like it's not to accomplish. It's busy, minuscule, degradation or degrading tasks to keep you busy. And so that's kind of like, that was one of the worst parts of the military for me.
Yeah, and if you, I mean, just in the civilian world, if you feel like your boss or whoever, or your upper levels, whatever, cares for you, you're gonna have that much more drive, to do hard work. But if you're just in the midst of a bureaucracy and you could do A or B and it doesn't matter, then why bother?
Yeah,
why not do the minimum?
Yeah, one of my favorite things, I don't remember who I heard it from, is like in the civilian world, it's people quit managers, they don't quit jobs. And I thought it was really like thought provoking at
Huh.
first because I was like, I've watched people, I've watched my mom leave jobs that paid her more than where she went to because she was like, I can't work for this person anymore. And I remember that, and I remember learning that in the Marine Corps. And it's like, the worst part is I can't quit my manager.
Yeah.
Like this guy doesn't, like, the dude could barely, like, we joke about us not being able to read. This guy was worse than us, and he was 36 years old. And it's like, I got to take orders from this guy. I have to follow this guy into a battle, and
Right.
like he doesn't even remember people's names. You think I think he cares about me? Like, he doesn't, obviously. And I've been working with him for the last year and a half on a day-to-day, like daily, briefing him, and he doesn't even like
Yeah.
acknowledge anything worth anything to me. So it was like a weird situation where it's like, everywhere else you see these people, they're going to college. You're 18, so everybody else is going to college, and you're going to the military, and you watch them partying and things like that every weekend. And you're in Okinawa, Japan, dealing with the guy that is supposed to and tells you every Friday that, hey, if anything happens to you guys, let me know. We'll get it figured out. We're a family in this unit, da 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 da, and we got to trust each other and have each other's backs. And then, like, one time I got my head split open playing basketball on the weekend, and we don't have cars. There's not a 911 really to call
Right.
in Okinawa, Japan, because you're on base. And so it's like, well, I need to go get stitches in my forehead. Let me call the next person ahead of me. The next person ahead of me, he's an E5. I'm an E3 at the time. He's not allowed to have a car. He's 28 years old, not allowed to have a car, can't get me there. I'm not taking a $70 taxi to a Japanese hospital.
Right.
And
Right.
so then I call him, doesn't answer the phone, call him again, finally answers the phone, and he's like, oh, well, I'm out doing something so and so somewhere. And it's like, well, all right, what do you want me to do then? Like, my head is bleeding. It's 9 o'clock at night. I definitely need stitches. There's no one that can give me stitches on this base. I have to go to a
Right.
completely different base. And then you go up a chain and finally find somebody to give you a ride to a hospital. And you're like, yeah, we're a family, right? And so you kind of lose all trust in your leadership. And it's like, well, fuck that then. Like, I don't care about you guys. And I'm going to argue with you guys as much as possible. And I'm going to make your guys just as much a living hell as you're trying to make my life. And that's kind of where I left the Marine Corps. And I was just like, I hate these people. I was really angry when I first got out.
Yeah. So moving to changing to 29 Palms, then when you got out, going to Phoenix, it's pretty hot in both of those places. How did you deal with your crayons melting?
It was rough, man. I just put them on top of my ice cream like sprinkles.
You shaved it on?
Yeah, shaved it. Or I just,
cheese grater.
Like the dipping ice cream at Circle K. I just dip it in, get a nice little coat of it on there.
Well, hard shell.
Yeah, hard shell. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
See, words, hard.
Yeah. Yep. Especially if there's more than 5 letters.
Dude, it was rough learning the word crayon.
Helps. Yeah.
They were colored sticks, which is even longer, but whatever. It works.
Oh, yeah. 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 Another thing that you guys talked about that really hit me was talking about, you mentioned a little bit, but suicide and the rates of it, experiences you had. Like you said, you mentioned that the episodes you've done, I think that's not really commonly, maybe not known, but even if it is, I don't think it's often acknowledged. It's kind of like a, thank you for your service, 22 a day kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
And it seems almost like it's just used to push it off. And I think if people don't acknowledge the cost of something, they're not going to be careful how they spend it or what they buy with it. So that helped me a lot, realizing just the cost of that and what it does to lives, not just whoever commits suicide, but those around.
Right.
Just yeah. And to be in that environment yourself, it's like the dark humor I think is necessary, like you guys said.
Yeah.
Just to deal with it.
Yeah, it makes it easier. Like the dark humor, like I get it. There's a lot of people that don't like it. And there's a lot of people that don't like, my parents don't like what I say on the podcast, which is fine. Like I told them, I was like, I don't expect, it's not for you guys. Like it's for
Sure.
people that went through similar experiences. And shoot, man. I mean, like if you look at Pete Davidson, his father died he's like a huge comedian. His father died in 9/11, and he's been on roast shows where they make fun of it, like his father being, not specifically his father being dead, but they make a roundabout. They're like, this isn't the roast of Pete Davidson's father right now. That was on September 11th, 2001. And it's like, that's a dark joke. And a lot of people are like, that makes me uncomfortable. But a lot of us, it's like, that's pretty funny. And it's like, when you've been through some, and I always tell people, like, I went through some crap growing up. I grew up in the ghetto. So like I went through a lot of crap before the Marine Corps that kind of made me more numb to things than most other people at the same time. And then I joined the Marine Corps, which didn't help it at all. But, like most of us, we come out with a pretty sick sense of humor. Like it's not funny to a lot of people, but it helps. Like a lot of people that have like pretty messed up lives, most of them have like the best sense of humor. And a lot of people that kind of had like the silver spoon or just a generally decent life, they see things differently, where it's not to say that the jokes and things like that aren't fucked up and that maybe you shouldn't joke about them. Maybe you shouldn't. We're not the ones to decide that, but at the same time, it helps us. So who are you to tell us that if it's helping us not go into the darkest depths of our fucking mind? Like, how are you going to tell me that it's not okay? And maybe, there's a time and place. And maybe we're not the best at the time and place. But regardless, it's just part of our culture in the Marine Corps. And if you want to change that, then maybe stop sending people to war for 20 fucking years and saying that the Secretary of Defense the last 2 weeks came out and said that COVID-19 is the biggest threat to our military. And then you look at the numbers and it was like 32 people in the United States military died from COVID-19. From COVID-19, and then you look at the same time frame and 700 active duty United States military members took their own lives, and a large portion of those never seeing combat. And it's like, that's the biggest thing. So
that's just active duty. That doesn't take into account
that
retired or whatever.
And the largest portion, so like with that 22 a day number, the largest portion of that is Vietnam era vets. They have a higher rate of suicide than anybody else currently, but post 9/11 is catching them because we've been there for 20 years, and people's children or people that served in the United States military in 2001, their children have fought. There was a father and son. One died in Iraq, and the son at 18 years old, 2019, died in Afghanistan. And it's like, what do you expect? You want us to be happy rainbow professionals? Like, that's not the way it works. You put us in a situation where you have to get used to death, and you have to get used to senseless loss of life, regardless if it's from your side or the other side. Like, people are going to go to dark places, and they're going to try to deal with it any way you can. Shit, I'd rather laugh about it than sit in my room in a dark corner with a bottle of alcohol.
Yeah. I wonder if back in the day, like the World War II generation, you mentioned the differences that TV show was talking about. I wonder if the dark humor was still a thing back then. Cause I mean, they might have had a different experience, but I'm sure they still see buddies die and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. They definitely had it. They definitely had the dark humor. It wasn't as poignant as it is now. Like it's very,
okay.
So like that was something, and that's the difference in like today's society compared now. That's like a societal thing. So you have a lot of like Typo's grandfather. He served in, I think it was either Vietnam or Korea. I don't remember. He served in then,
Mm-hmm.
and his dad, he was in Panama and the Gulf War, and like Typo, for both of them. I mean, with his grandfather especially, his grandfather didn't talk about it, and when they came back, they were professionals. They were their white tie or blue collar selves. They went out and became professionals. And I think with society as it is now, with social media and things like that, there's a lot of us that are like, we don't fit into that culture. You can't come back from the military nowadays and go into that. You can. It's not impossible, but
Sure.
the way you talk and the way you speak is a lot different. You're not the professional soldier that was back then, and they weren't either. I mean, you had they were just as bad. They just probably weren't as vocal about it, and it wasn't as known because they didn't have the same type of media that we had now, where we're just there's three of us that do a podcast, and we say some outlandish crap and it gets retweeted and whatever. So it's just not as known. And when they're with each other, I bet you they said some crazy stuff. I mean, even some of the historical movies, or like some of the quotes from some of those guys, you're like, damn, that's a pretty dark joke. And maybe they just worded it differently, or it was always there. When you're around extremes of society, you're on the margins of society, the very small parts of society. You encounter things that nobody else does, and you have to find a way to process it. And I think no matter what generation you were in, that you did it in your own way, but that dark humor, the comedy aspect of it is one that's been like tried and true, and people use it a lot. It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah. And also it's possible that their jokes at the time were just as fringe to their culture as what we say, what you guys.
That's the other thing.
Deal with.
Yeah, you see like comedians
change.
Exactly. You see comedians from 20 years ago, and you're like, that joke. Well, I mean, it's getting to be a little bit different now, but
it goes both ways. Yeah.
Yeah. You like 40 years ago, you see some of their jokes, and you're like, that's kind of a weak joke. Like, that's not even that. Like, you hear everybody in the audience go, ooh, and like it was like a disturbing joke, and all of us are like, oh, that's not that bad compared to the comedians nowadays. And then, I mean, you're kind of seeing a weird switch back to that, but I guess that's a little off topic.
Yeah. One thing, two aspected question, but just relating to you getting out, and then you were talking about like seeing your parents again, and then all that. Kind of two aspects. I'm curious how you what you shared with them, and how that affected your relationship, and then also your advice to just random listener who's a civilian and has a friend who gets out or who is in the military, because the typical, oh, did you kill anybody, and it's like, dude, shut up. Right. What if someone's listening, they're like, hey, I've got a friend in the military, like, what's a good way to bond with them without being a turd,
Yeah. So with my parents, it was weird at first. My mom was like, I always called her a Nazi. She was very strict with me. I mean, she had me when she was 16, so she didn't want me to make the same mistake, basically. And so she was very strict with me, and I was always very careful with what I said around them. I was a little hoodlum still, but I just wasn't a little hoodlum around them. And but when I came back, I had a really like don't give a fuck mentality, and I kind of had that growing up. I was pretty independent most of my life, and so I kind of had that mentality growing up. But it was very respectful, my relationship with my parents, and they were like super fun loving, and we always did stuff together, and I love my parents. But it was a little bit, it shifted where it was, well, I was an adult now, and I basically lived 4 years of my life without them really being involved in it. So that was a little weird coming back into. And one of the ways I just tried to be around them as much as possible while they were still in Phoenix, because it made me feel better. It made me feel more normal again. Because I was so angry getting out of the Marine Corps, just like super angry and like angsty. And
Yeah.
Like these people, everybody, like people don't get shit is how I felt.
Listen to
And
emo music even.
yeah, well, I listened to that before, so I just listened to more of it. Um, but so it just kind of like you really felt like nobody understood you, which is it goes right along the same lines of like emo fucking hard rock. But
Yeah, but you had an experience that they genuinely didn't, and it changed you for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and one of the things that really helped me personally was I needed to get over my anger from things. Because I was never an angry person and I hated being angry. So I needed to, like, that took me a while to work on. That took me a couple years to work on. Being with my buddies, that helped a lot. We didn't have a whole lot of non-military friends. But one of the things that I would say to the people that do have those friends, you got to let them, when they're talking, you got to let them talk or say like, hey, you can't say that. Like maybe later on afterwards, like,
Sure.
hey, probably not the best situation to say that. And they're probably going to react, well, well, that guy's a bitch then if I can't say that around them, and be like, yeah, I get it. Maybe he is. But you gotta let them, they gotta figure, like, the social, how people react off of social cues.
Yeah.
You kind of lose that because all of our social cues are the same in the military, and especially when you're in secluded areas, whether it's combat or Okinawa or just on base, all our social cues are similar. Like there's basically nothing you can't joke about. You know what I mean? There's basically nothing you can't say. Shoot, the amount of times that I heard the N-word in the military, from white dudes to black dudes, was insane. And it's like with any other, talking shit to anybody, there's a threat of violence behind every word. That's kind of, and everybody knew that. So that was our only social cue, is like, is this escalating to a threat of violence? Is this not escalating to a threat of violence? That's my social cue on if we're good or if we're not good.
Yeah.
And so, and I think we take veterans themselves, when people react poorly to something we say, I think a lot of us take it as they're judging the experiences that I went through instead of judging the thing that I just said. Because like a lot of times it's like, you see a police report and it's like Marine Corps veteran, drunk driving, hit a family, and they're like, and then the line right afterwards is had PTSD, and it's like you get grouped into this.
Oh yeah,
like they group all this stuff together that had no correlation. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so a lot of people, I think a lot of vets, what we have to do is get over ourselves, to be honest. And when we say something and other people don't like it, we shouldn't take offense to that in the sense of they're judging our experiences. They're just judging what you just said, specifically. And, there's also the time periods where people will judge you. They don't think that you should say that because of the experience. So that's something that you're going to have to figure out as well. But mostly for the people that have buddies coming home, or girls that are coming home, or whatever, just friends in general that are coming home from the military, just know that they're not going to be the same people. And I think one of the big things is that I would hate getting told is like, oh, you were never like this before. And it's like, I'll fucking fight you. Like, no shit.
Yeah.
Like, you're not the same. You're more of a bitch than you used to be. Like, no. But it's like, those things, you got to realize that they're brand new people, and they're still your old friends, but you're going to have to understand them as they are now, because their perspectives are completely different than yours. Just like your perspectives on what to say and what not to say in certain situations are different as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Your humor of your coping mechanism of humor is so linked with the experience that if I take offense at your humor, then you take it as getting upset at the experience or denigrating
Right.
the experience.
Right. Saying that it's not justifiable.
Yeah, like you might remember a friend by joking about his suicide, and then if I
Right.
get offended at that, you're like, well, no, he was a cool guy. I liked him.
Yeah.
Why do you hate him?
Yeah. Well, and it, so it's like that. And they're like, well, I don't like, and like the thing about suicide is suicide affects a shit ton of people, right? Like, it's not just the military. It's just higher in the military. But it's like, you know, you make a joke about either killing yourself or your buddy trying to kill himself and failing. And they're like, dude, you really shouldn't joke about suicide. My cousin tried to commit suicide. And it's like, yeah, well, sorry, dude. Like, the joke that I just made was about my buddy putting a 45 in his mouth. Like, you don't think I know what suicide is? Like, it's not that it's not funny, but it is funny because he missed and didn't end up killing himself. Like, it's like, I get the disconnect, and it's because the perspective is different. The perception from both parties are so anatomically different that we miss each other. It's like, like you miss the understanding of it. Like, they have such a personal connection with that cousin, and it's sad. And for us, it's like, we don't like being sad because you can't be sad in a lot of aspects of your life. And that during that time, that it's, well, rather than being sad, I can be sad, but make it funny. So at least I have something, I have like some hope of it getting better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's the big thing, is that we just, for the most part, what happens with vets is you just miss each other with the way that you put yourself out there, and the experiences that you go through compared to somebody that never went in. And that's not to say that that's just a blanket statement for everybody. It's just like a loose generalization, is that what the actual problem is both sides are just missing completely what the other is trying to do. And one will take it personally, which makes the other take it personally, because now it's like, no, now you're saying that I'm making fun of my buddy. Like, that's not what I'm doing. You know, it's just one of those weird things where it's like, I'm not making fun of him, as I know that it sounds like I'm making a joke and using him as the butt of it, but it's because it's the way that he did it. Like, you have to go in to explain it, and then it's really not funny, and then people are just upset. And yeah.
If you have to explain a joke, it's it's like someone say a joke is like a user interface. If you have to explain it, it's no good.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
One question I like to ask everybody specifically is, if a kid 17, 18 years old or whatever was to come to you and say, I'm thinking about joining the military, what would be your advice?
Don't. Simply put, that's kind of, so that's one of the reasons why we started our podcast as well. I should have said that, was we wanted to let the next generations below us know, like, hey, this isn't especially with kind of the crowd that we fit into, like this, kind of right-winged anarchist, like area with our podcast. Like, that's kind of where we fit in. We wanted to let people know that, like, it's not something that's conducive for freedom, or it's not something that's conducive for intelligence. It's not something that's conducive for putting your head down and just getting through it, and there'll be success at the end of the tunnel. So I really try and stress when people ask me that question, and thankfully we have a lot of people that ask us that question. I think we're doing pretty good on that success rate of getting people not to. Is don't join, and the reasons why they're not conducive to those things that I listed before. And I mean, you know, we may make it sound like it's fun. Like I said, it's our coping mechanism, and you always remember the good times more than the bad times. And there's obviously a lot that there's stuff that you can get out of it, but the pros don't outweigh the cons. And you can, all the same pros, that brotherhood, that familial bond, that is probably the biggest thing that I took out of the military. You can get that outside of that. Be a good person and find your group of friends, and you'll you can get the exact same thing outside of it. Everything that I loved about the military, I learned that I loved to teach people. I love teaching people. I think it's really fun, and I love people. I love the realization people get when they just figured something out. Like, I love that. And knowing that I had something to do with that, that was something that I learned in the Marine Corps, teaching junior Marines how to work on radios and, how to get away with shit and all that other fun stuff. I loved that. And I could have gotten that outside of it, just joining a trade, like I learned all this stuff and now I can pass it on to the new guy that we hired. Like all the things that I loved about the Marine Corps, I could have gotten outside of the Marine Corps very easily just by being who I was at 18 and continuing the way that I was working, as long as you're continuously striving to be better. Because in the Marine Corps, it's very hard to continuously strive to be better because it's not something that rewards merit for the most part. Not like true merit. Like being good at your job is 1/4 of being a good Marine. The rest of it is, do you look good in a uniform? Can you say yes, sir, and no, sir, at the right times? Do
you not show up to work not drunk?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got away with that for 45 days straight. So,
oh boy.
But, and like I said, I got out as an E5. That's pretty hard to do as a radio operator. It's not as hard anymore, the way scores are and stuff like that. But it was pretty hard to do when I went through, and I didn't get like actual paperwork, but I was the rocking the boat person, but I was the go-to for everything. I controlled all of their, I controlled a lot of the assets in the comm shop. I did a lot for a lot of people and made them look really good so that they knew that if I just quit and gave up, which I didn't have it in me, even if they destroyed my life, I wouldn't have been able to, because I just hate letting work go. But I'd make the threat that, like, bet if you don't want me to do it, or if you're going to do this and you're going to treat me like this, then I'm going to let you fall flat on your face and make you look just as bad as you're going to try and make me look. And a lot of people, because they were so incompetent at those things that I was doing, they kind of let things go. And so like, I was a damn good Marine. Like I was damn good on paper, and I'm always very respectful. I like being respectful. I like giving respect and earning other people's respect, but I just hated the instant disrespect that was rampant throughout the military based off of rank. And so that's kind of where like those are the things that are like important to me. And that's one of the things that I warn for like kids going in, because a lot of it, they went in, they're looking to join for the same reasons I did. They like that respect, that air of respect that you get outside of it. And man, you can be a pillar in your community without ever joining the military, just by being, a decent human being and taking care of people around you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but if you join the military, then you're an automatic expert.
And you get Denny's every Liberty,
Yeah, no kidding.
You get to make crayon jokes all the time.
Yeah, or if you don't get your free Denny's, are you even a veteran?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're kind of nearing the end of it. Do you have any plugs? Anything you want to?
Yeah, you can. Just basically our podcast. If you're a vet and you listen to this, you can check us out on bitingthebulletpod.com. It's a pretty dope website. You can find our all of our links there. You can find me at Keep It Real Luke on Twitter, and Keep It Real, I think it's Keep It Real Luke on Instagram as well. And then we have a crazy Instagram page that's got more followers than anything else we do, and it's at Biting the Bullet Podcast, I think, on Instagram. Also on our website and through our Instagram, you can find all of our merch. You can get a super cool hat like I have on, or like you have on. And we got some funny stuff on there. We try to keep it, our show's pretty light. We get dark sometimes about the way the world is going, and we kind of pile on ourselves. But we like to bring some comedy into the craziness of how the world is right now. So if anybody's out there that sounds like something you're into, go ahead and check it out. We're pretty funny guys. Typo and I, we like to joke. So
yeah, and for you and the listener, for what it's worth, your show was the goals of your show, I guess, was a big inspiration to me for starting this little deal.
Yeah, not the show itself, just the goals. No,
just the goals. Yeah. Because what do I know? I never served. Just reaching out to vets and everything, and that's a lot of people. Thank you for your service, all that stuff. They kind of do a surface acknowledgement.
Yeah,
but I think just to really realize and acknowledge just the individual and what they did and how it affected them. How being in the military affected them. I think again, if you don't acknowledge the cost of something, you're not going to be careful how you what you spend it on.
Right.
So
I think you hit it nail on the head right there. Is we get blanket statemented a lot, like as vets, and
sure.
I guess that'd be one thing that I would add on is treat them like an individual. Don't treat them like another vet. And they're still your buddy from back home. They're still that person. They're maybe a little bit different, but treat them as the individual and don't look at them any different just because they joined the military. They're still that person. A lot of them are still scared kids inside. We were talking about the mental capacity part about it and how we kind of revert. And I think that's a big thing. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Just treat them as the individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome. Thanks for coming on and making the time to yammer a bit, and appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. I appreciated it. It was a good time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How I Embraced the Suck. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. And as my Girl Scout den mother used to say, stay frosty.
I like where you're going with the show, and I can't wait to promote it everywhere and have everybody see it.